Live. Hello, this is Alex Howard from O'Reilly Media. We're here at the Open Government Partnerships Annual Conference. This is their meeting where people have come from all over the world. We just heard from a whole succession of speakers, and with me I have two important representatives from within this partnership. Chris Vienne, who's the Deputy Chief Technology Officer for the White House for Public Sector Innovation. You are one of the leads in open government in the United States federal government. And Warren Krafchik, you were just announced to be the co-chair of Open Government's Partnerships Civil Society side. So since we're fortunate enough to have you here, and you were here watching what I did this morning, can you tell me some of your takeaways from this morning? What did we hear? What was significant about that time?
Warren, do you want to kick us off?
Well, I think what was most significant about this time is that you have here an amazing gathering, a very unusual gathering of not only 55 countries, which is unusual in itself, but you have civil society from all of those countries and internationally. So what's most unique about this gathering is a partnership. It's a partnership where civil society and government are sitting at the same level to work on the same problems that they confront, to look for a new way to engage in development, a way to produce services for citizens that work, a way to involve citizens in those processes, and ways for citizens to hold governments accountable for how they use their public resources. I think that's the unique opportunity we have here.
You mentioned something important there about services. Traditionally, open government and around the conversation has focused on transparency and accountability. Now we've talked about collaboration, participation, co-creation of services, something that has become a very interesting topic in the United States and, of course, around the world. Can you talk about the context for improved services through open government in the context of the public sector that you're seeing, Chris?
Thanks. Actually, for me and for a lot of people on our team, the actual participation and collaboration pillars, if you will, of open government are the most exciting. Certainly, building upon the years of work on transparency is vitally important to actually enabling the ability to create these new products and services that you're talking about. But I think for me, one of the most exciting things is actually opening up government and allowing anybody, whether that be a citizen, whether that be a small business, civil society organization, to come in with us and jointly solve the problems that we face. I mean, I think we've come to the conclusion and realization finally that government doesn't have to solve all of the problems itself. In fact, we can't solve all the problems ourselves. So what we need to be able to do is figure out how we can work with others and do this thing called the platform, where we can take a look at our assets and what products and services we do have, and then create a foundation for others to actually create that value on top of it. And certainly in the United States, we're having amazing success with that around in energy and in health and in education and other sectors. And so what I really see happening, I think worldwide, is a movement away from just transparency to using that transparency to actually create value, as you said, with citizens or just others as co-creators of those solutions.
So one of the themes from this morning from members of civil society and different NGOs and non-governmental organizations who shared the stage appropriately for this partnership was that this is not just about open government in terms of the government itself opening itself, that the civil society plays an important role, so does the press, so does citizens. Can you talk a bit about how civil society will actually hold government accountable for its commitments on these open government plans?
So let me start by just saying something about the theory of change that operates here. And the idea is that if you put more information into the public domain and provide the public with opportunities to use that information, they will provide their own solutions and information, which makes better policies, but they'll also be in a position to use that information to hold the government to account. And that's entirely appropriate. The government uses citizens' money in order to provide services to citizens, and that's the chain that we're looking at. So in OGP, citizens have a couple of opportunities to hold the government to account. The first is that they help to create the plans, the action plans in the first place. The second is that a multi-stakeholder forum needs to be created to monitor the implementation of those plans. So that's essential. And then there's a third element, which is the one that's going to become more important as we move towards implementation, which is the independent review mechanism. So that's an independent body with local facilitators and local researchers that's tasked with traveling around the country and listening to and researching to what extent the government has managed to both achieve the process of its commitments as well as the content of its commitments. That becomes public report, together with any other citizen reports and a report from the government. So what you have is you have accountability. You have accountability because of a conversation that provides information that's extracted from citizens, from government, from everybody in society. And that's the accountability chain that we're trying to put in place.
What are the consequences of not meeting one of those, described mechanisms for, your commitments for a country?
Well, the consequences are that you're in the public domain, that information is in the public domain, and governments that do well will receive the compliments and the positive attention from the public domain. Governments that don't do well will firstly receive advice and collaboration from other governments and civil society. The first idea of OGP is to make it work. But if that approach doesn't work, then the government in the public domain will receive the dissatisfaction of their citizens and the public at large. And that's the crucial accountability charter. So we assume that governments that enter into this process are doing it because they want to do well, and they want to make sure that the world sees that they do well. If they don't, then the counter will hold.
So I see, did you want to comment further on that? I see a great deal of commentary right now online about this discussion here this morning. And one of the things that came out of some of the plenary speakers, quoting Franklin, for instance, on the need to focus on acts, not words, right? And the question I think many people will have of their governments is, now that you have these plans, what will change for me? There were some very meaningful descriptions of things from this morning. Can you share some of the potential changes that have been described, and also some of the examples where things have already gotten better because of governments becoming more open?
So I'll just use the United States as an example. So the United States has been working at open government as a concept perhaps longer than most countries here. So for the past 2.5 years, we've developed quite a range of plans and actions across all federal agencies in the government. But quite frankly, that is reaching now down into states and cities. So all 3 levels of government in the United States are creating plans and living up to those plans. I think as we have matured, and I think there's no question that open government is maturing, and the United States, like most countries, our plans are maturing as well. We've come to understand exactly that we need to be showing actions, we need to be showing outcomes. And I think, without boring you with all of our actions, probably thousands of actions, I think there are a couple of note that really are important because they are actually saving lives. And I think ultimately that's probably a pretty darn important outcome. What we did was, like most countries, start with looking at data and releasing data, and then creating opportunities for that data to be used in new and meaningful ways. One of the ways that we're doing that is with our in our healthcare system with our vets and something called Blue Button. And so today, a veteran who receives his healthcare or her healthcare through the VA system can download her personal health record or records about her health. That was actually suggested by somebody within government. It became part of the plan. We built it out, and it is now developing a worldwide movement of actually releasing data and having citizens whose data, it really is theirs, actually use it and make better healthcare decisions. And we have had veterans literally write us and say that has saved their life. They have been able to share that data and make different choice decisions about their healthcare. And to me, that's kind of the ultimate indication of what we're doing here with open government.
So technology is coming up a lot here. Both the president of Brazil and Hillary Clinton specifically cited the role of technology, the tools that are now at the hands of average citizens that would only have been possible for someone who's quite adept 10 years ago and impossible for anyone, really anyone, 2 decades ago. You spoke to this as well in the context of civil society. What are the most important new tools that civil society has literally in their hands or at their fingertips to hold governments more accountable, to open them up, to help make that information more understandable? What are the areas that you'd point to as being really hopeful in that area?
Well, probably the most important one and obvious one is mobile phones, mobile technologies. I mean, this is creating a situation where citizens can monitor government services, provide real-time feedback to governments on those services, and to hear back from government in real time about how they're responding to those services. So that in a sense targets or touches each of the cornerstones, touchstones of participation. That's what mobile technology allows us to do. But in addition to that, the internet itself, access to databases, all of that's incredibly important. You were talking about impact, and it reminded me of a story a couple of years ago in Mexico where the government spends annually $20 billion on NAFTA subsidies to farmers. Putting that data online for the first time enabled local civil society organizations to organize and analyze that data and find out what the government itself didn't know, that 80% of its subsidies were going to 10% of the richest farmers. That analysis, together with the use of the media, the internet, cell phones, and other forms of organizing, it convinced the government or encouraged the government to cap subsidies to big farmers and to substantially improve the subsidies to small farmers. So it's the interplay of technology and citizens that's really important, that starts creating opportunities, many of which I don't think we even have realized yet.
It's quite remarkable to see the confluence of internet-connected citizens with smartphones, with cameras, who have access to data and social media to talk amongst themselves. The impact of that is still being seen, I think, in every single country around the world, including the one that we hail from. So last question, because I know that you two gentlemen are probably just as hungry as everyone else here. For those people watching, you know that the conference has gone on over time a little bit in terms of the scheduling. What is the most important takeaway that you have from all of the speeches this morning? What do you think is going to change as a result of all these people coming together?
Well, two things. One is, I think, a very, very important takeaway is that innovation and excellence is universal. There was a time when you looked particularly to Europe and the US for the best practices, for the models of how to conduct governance.
Right.
That's shifted. We now have Tanzania, Colombia, Brazil, South Africa, India.
Yep.
These are now, in many cases, the yardsticks of what good practices are. And I think that completely shifts the development paradigm in this world.
Yep.
So that for me is a very, very important takeaway. The second takeaway is that, as somebody mentioned, OGP, after just 6 months of operation, now covers a quarter of the world's population. 1.8 or so billion people are now covered by OGP operation. And I think that the takeaway is we have an incredibly important foundation here. We're going into implementation. And imagine what we can do together across these countries, across 1.8 million people, to change lives, but also to create examples of how many, many more countries and the rest of the world can change lives.
And the only thing I can add to that great summary is that in the audience, and I wish everybody could actually be here and experience the energy in the audience, because people not only are excited about the strategies and the plans and all of the great things that are happening on the stage, but actually what's happening is the conversations as people are learning and saying, oh, that's how you're doing that. I thought I was the only one that had the problem, or what a great idea. I want to take that into my own country and I want to play with it. So I think people are now moving past the grand platitudes, the ideals, and they're actually turning that into action. And it's just been amazing seeing the networking going on. And I think in the next 3 to 6 months, you mentioned how young this is. It is incredibly young, but I think it's also incredibly inspired by what's happening here. And to build on what you just said, I think we will see probably double or triple the amount of innovation going on just as a result of being challenged to do it and having all of us in a room committed to doing it. And I think when we have this conversation, hopefully in the next 3 months or 6 months or whenever we do this, that we can actually show what has happened as a result of this meeting.
Well, I know one of the examples of cross-pollination is that the United States has adopted something very similar to the United Kingdom's e-petition platform as part of our own open government site. We the People, for people who haven't checked that out. And there's been quite a lot of activity on that platform, as you know.
Well, yeah, and you know, the whole work we're doing with India on the open sourcing the open government platform, created that, would never have happened without this kind of event from taking place.
Okay, well, thanks to both of you for joining. For people who are listening here, we've got Chris Vienne. If you're interested in OpenGov and what's happened in the White House, you're one of the key contacts, Deputy CTO for Public Sector Innovation. And then Warren Krafchik, International Budget Partnership, and in this context, the new co-chair of the Open Government Partnership from the civil society side. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you very much for tuning in. This afternoon, there's going to be breakouts that go to different regions. So if you're watching online, know that you'll be able to tune into specific areas. Obviously, there's a live blog. We can go back and look at a lot of things that people have been saying. And if you go, of course, to opengovpartnership.org, you'll see all the different countries' open government plans. And you're starting to see civil society reactions to those as well, which I encourage everyone to go find and read. Thank you. You'll see more of us broadcasting here for the next 48 hours.